Good afternoon. I'm Laura Smith, and we are at the Cape Charles Museum this afternoon. It is October the 21st, 2024, and we are here to interview the infamous Neville brothers. That would be Bill Neville and Jan Neville, who are original residents with a very long history in Cape Charles. We're very delighted that they have agreed to let us interview them today. And we can't wait to get started because they have lots of great history to share with us. And today our interviewer, or inquisitor, as I've been informed, is Jean Hunt Steffens, who we just interviewed last, and she's the daughter of Herman Hard Times Hunt. So, with that said, take it away, Jean.
Okay, I was wondering if you were born in Cape Charles and in the house there on Randolph.
That's Waddock's, the hospital, but the house had just been built, and my mom and dad moved in with us about pretty much at the same time, and I still live there.
So you were like the first owners there.
Only ones, yes. And,
Yeah. Where were your mom and dad from?
Well, Mom grew up in Cape Charles, right on Randolph Avenue, around 600 block. Her father came here from Ocracoke back around 1900, and he was a lighthouse tender, not a lighthouse keeper, but a lighthouse tender. And he moved on to become a businessman in Cape Charles, installed Delco systems and that kind of thing, and an electrician. I don't know how far you want me to go with this. But he ultimately became, I think he was on the town council at some point, had 7 children, and one of them, Lance Fulcher, our oldest uncle, was mayor at some point in the 50s, as I remember. Dad grew up in a Nancock. He was born in Crisfield, but he grew up in a Nancock, and he, sometime around World War I, actually a little earlier than that, 1917, I guess, so it wasn't that early, worked at Tasley for the railroad, and I suspect he was living in a Nancock then. I don't know exactly when, but at some point, there's a book in a picture in Jim Lewis's book of him with the railroad group down at Cape Charles, sometime in the early 1920s. So I suspect he moved to Cape Charles to work for the railroad sometime in that period. And of course, at that time, my mom would have only been, she was born in 1909. So she would have only been 12 years old. So, so when he came down here, he didn't know any of them, I don't think, or not closely. Dad was born in 1897. Yeah, right. So he was considerably older than her at the time. But anyhow, so he lived here and worked for the railroad until he passed away in 1947.
He passed away young.
Yes, 51? Yeah, we about 50, but we were 5.5 years old when he died, so we didn't get to interact with him a whole lot. Yeah, it's kind of sorry about that because we had memories, but they're not.
Yeah.
I can remember him singing a song to us when we were laying on the bed, Mary's oats and dozy oats and little lambsy divey and a killy divey too, wouldn't you? I don't know if anybody's ever even heard of that or not. You need more accompaniment.
That reminds me.
A lot more.
That reminds me to ask you, they were originally from Ireland?
The Nevilles were. The Fulchers came from England, I guess, to the Norfolk area and into the Outer Banks, as best I can judge. And that's where my grandfather, Mom's dad, moved from Ocracoke. Lived in Norfolk for about a year, where my oldest uncle, Lance Fulcher, who picture's behind me here, was born, and then they moved to Cape Charles around 1900. And so he worked, like I say, as an electrician, and he sold what they called Delco systems back in the day when rural places didn't have electricity. they generated, they have a generator that would charge DC batteries, and the lights in the house and whatever they had worked off 12 volt DC, 12 or 6 volt, whatever. And at some point he was on the town council and that kind of thing. And had 7 children, let's say.
But Lance, Lance Fulcher, my mother's brother, was the mayor. That's who Fulcher Street across the road here is named for him. And,
Lance Fulcher.
Lance Fulcher. Yeah.
So he lived on Ocracoke before he came here?
No, Lance didn't. Lance was born.
No, I mean your dad.
Grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Our grandfather,
Mother's side.
William Fulcher,
Uh-huh.
but lived on Ocracoke. Dad's family came from Nancock.
I see.
They moved to Nancock sometime around the time of the Civil War, and then down to Cape Charles. My father moved. I'm going to guess somewhere around 1920, working for the railroad. So, and he spent the rest of his life here, as did my mom. So, and us for the most part.
Which one was it that basically went out to get a loaf of bread and didn't come back for 2 years or something?
That was somebody I worked with.
Oh, I remember.
Dumb overpower.
I remember Bob telling that. I think it was a threat.
Well, yeah,
Him telling
told
this.
his wife he was going to go and get a loaf of bread. 2 weeks later,
Who was it they were looking for that was running a bar down in Savannah?
That was
After the Civil War, he
Yeah.
didn't come home. He stayed down there.
Yeah, that was her great grandfather,
Yeah.
and that's how the Nevilles got here. They arrived early on in the late 1700s in Charleston. Joshua Neville.
There's a photograph of
Just be Joshua.
Joshua.
He was in Charleston.
In Charleston, and he was a cabinet maker. And then he lived there, and his son Henry Neville worked with him, and then Henry's children, kind of a long story, but anyhow, they ended up at some point moving to Columbia, South Carolina, and our great grandfather William Neville moved to Nancock sometime after the Civil War. He married a girl from the Nancock in the 1850s. I suspect they probably met in Baltimore. She was from around the Nancock area, and back in that time, I think the steamboats were a way of connecting with places if you wanted to go shopping and stuff like that. So it was either Norfolk or Baltimore, and steamers ran directly from Baltimore to the Nancock. So I suspect that's how they met. But anyhow, he ended up during the Civil War. He volunteered for the South, and he ended up being a paymaster in Thunderbolts, Georgia, which is a suburb of Savannah now. And he was down there, and when the war ended, my aunt had written a letter with all his history on it, and she said in 1867 he returned to his family in Nancock, and I said, 1867? Civil War ended in 1865, from what I remember. Well, he was running a bar down in Charleston at the time. And apparently a fight broke out in there between, I think it was probably pretty rough times down there right after the Civil War. But anyhow, a fight broke out in his bar, and some cop came in and killed another cop or something, and there was I saw it, found it in the papers, there was a big trial and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that he got worried or what, but he testified and all that kind of stuff. But not long after that, he went back to Nancock to his family in 1867.
Get out of Dodge, right?
Yeah, and so that's what. But his wife, her family were the Misters, or no, not his wife wasn't. But anyhow, the bottom line is that his family in Virginia had been in the Nancock and Accomack for years, and in the southern part of the eastern shore of Maryland.
Your mom, was she a mister?
No,
was your
my mom was a Fulcher.
Fulcher.
They were the
that's
ones
where.
from Ocracoke.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess like my dad's dad, who was also named William Neville, son of the guy that was in the Civil War, or no, grandson of the guy that was in the Civil War that first came to Virginia. he seemed to have changed jobs a lot from what I could tell. He was moving back and forth at some point. He was in Accomack in some kind of a business, and then he was selling paint in a Hancock at some point. And then he was in Chrisfield doing some stuff up there or whatever. So he moved around a bit. I'm not sure he ever had a long, continuous job at one place. So I guess the family moved some of those places, maybe in some parts they didn't. But Dad mainly grew up, I would say, in Hancock and Chrisfield. Maybe his early life in Chrisfield, and then later life in Hancock. When he volunteered in World War I in 1917, he was living in Hancock. So,
Right.
Do you know what your grandfather or what he did at all in Chrisfield?
I think he had a paint store there at some point. He was selling paint. I saw in one newspaper ad or something. And then he had a bookstore. I think that was in Hancock, though.
Jewelry too, didn't he, or something, watchmaker or
Well,
something?
no, that was one of his sons. Well, no, he did have. He did deal in jewelry at some point. So, like I said, he was all over the place as far as things that he did, I guess. I think he even ended up in jail one time. When I went to the Accomack Eastern Shore Library in Accomack, and I saw Miles Barnes in there. I'm looking for family roots and all that. You got any Neville that you can think of in your record? Well, Miles knew everything by heart that he was in there. Yeah, I think we got something there. He said, let me see. And he pulled out this index thing. He pulled out a little 3x5 card. It says, William Neville, Christmas, 1899, in jail in Accomack. And that was it. so we do have a few miscreants in the family.
Well, we had down in Charleston or Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
That was
Yeah, our family, the Nevilles moved from Charleston to Columbia, and our Joshua Neville, our earliest relative in the U.S., moved there. In his later years, he died down there in 1851 or two, something like that. But anyhow, we were trying to find. I was researching him, my grandfather, William Neville. And I looked at the only thing I could find was a newspaper. No, it was a census. And in the census, it had all these Nevilles in there. And then it was a separate little box. It had him, William Neville, and two other people. And then besides that, this is a jail. And he was in jail for, when was it burglary?
the furniture. He ran a furniture
Yeah,
business, and evidently there was some disagreement.
It
Somebody
was-
owed him some money. Or,
It was something to do with breaking and entering or something. I don't remember what it was, but anyhow, so Jan and I were down there on a search one day for our Neville history,
Fact
So we
finding.
went at Columbia and we went to see the police chief. And the secretary said, come on in, he loves history, come on in. So anyhow, but we went in there and talked with him. And when I asked him, do they have any records of the specifics of his trial or anything like that, he said the Yankees burned all that during the Civil War. They didn't have anything. So it's kind of a dead end, but it was still kind of interesting. But anyhow, immediately after he got out of jail, he came to Baltimore and lived in Baltimore. And that's where I think he met the girl from Hancock that he married. So that was the connection with Eastern Shores. After he came back from the Civil War, he actually ended up in Hancock.
We got a small Bible that was sent to him.
We don't have it. One of our Marvin Ann's
Okay.
daughter has it,
But-
Susan. I've got some pictures from it.
Somehow it became apparent that the Bible was sent to, and his address was the jail. I'm trying to get him to act right, I guess.
Yeah.
Was he was he Quaker or Lutheran or?
There were Quakers in their
Methodist.
family.
When Joshua came over, they were Quakers from Ireland. And I've got some Quaker records of some Quakers from, I'm thinking Philadelphia maybe, came to visit there. Apparently there was a Quaker group in Charleston. And they came down to visit Charleston and met with Joshua and his son Henry. And they said some nice things about Henry. He seemed to be an intelligent person. And they didn't say anything bad about Joshua, but anyhow, so at that time apparently they were still Quakers. But then like, I think when he came here, he didn't have an E on the end of his name, which kind of was, the Quakers, they didn't like anything fancy. It was
Right.
kind of showing them off. And it eventually evolved to have an E on the end of it. So I think he kind of drifted away from the Quakers somewhere along at that time. But I could find Quaker records back in Ireland, back in
Yeah.
1700s where, they were in Ireland. And I've never traced him back to England, which I suspected the Quakers, for the most part, from what I understand, they didn't develop in Ireland. They were established in England, and then some of them moved to Ireland.
Right.
I can find my oldest ancestor in Dublin in the 1680s or something like
Wow.
that, Neville. So
They were in Mount Mellick, someplace.
Mount Mellick is where they were in Ireland at some point.
They may
Queenstown.
just have gotten tired of adding the E on the end. Because like Stephens was originally an I and they just stopped dotting it. It became an E.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You were talking about the Misters, their connection with the Misters. There's Bill, I think, found out through some of his research that we are related to a low-class pirate named Marmaduke Mister that used to raid boats or whatever up in Maryland, I think it was.
I think if you had a boat full of elderly ladies,
He robbed
clinging to
children
their purses
and
and
jewelry and stuff.
He targeted them. That's maybe a little exaggeration, but he was called a picaroon, I think.
Those are the colorful parts of our
He
family.
was a generous pirate. He didn't
Yeah.
take too much.
We all have some characters in them.
Yeah. But
Well, when you started school, of course, you started here at Cape Charles. In kindergarten, there wasn't kindergarten then, so.
We
Yeah,
started in
first
1948 in
grade.
first grade here.
First grade,
Yeah.
And Mrs. Scott was our first grade teacher.
Mrs. Scott.
And she had been there for years, decades. And anyhow, she was their teacher for the first half of the year, and then she retired. But one of the things I remember, she was very strict. But she was a nice lady. She was very strict. But I remember one of the early days in school, and we were all sitting there, and Miss Scott was talking or something, and Ann Wilson was sitting beside me. I think that's who it was. But anyhow, whoever was spit on the floor, and she came over to her ruler or whatever and smashed her mouth. So that was my first lesson. I will not spit on the floor in Miss Scott's room.
Right.
So,
Remember that one.
Yeah. So anyhow, that was.
We had a photograph that was taken the day we were headed to school for our first time. We're standing out in the front yard with our little shorts on and everything, dressed all pretty and everything, ready to go to school. And this friend Bill's going to tell a story on me in a minute. It's not true, by the way, but he's going to tell it. So this is a rebuttal to that, sort of, before we get started. At any rate, there's a picture of us standing in the front yard. We've got our little shorts on and everything. And a friend of mine who's a sort of an artist embellished the picture somewhat. Let's say he did some modifications to the shorts in such a way that appeared to be more manly than him. And well, he at the bottom of the picture says, "Not really identical twins."
Oh, that's hilarious. So that kind of reminds me, I hear there's a picture around of one of y'all with your finger up your nose.
That's the picture he's going to.
Strange, I have
Not
a copy of
right,
that
not
picture.
right.
I've got it on my camera here.
You've got that
sitting
picture.
sitting on the back step of the house that Jan still lives in today. Jan and I were probably 2 years old, 3 years old, somebody sitting on the steps. And Jan's got his finger 2 knuckles deep in his nose. And in my mama's handwriting, so it's got to be right, she's identified that as Jan. And me sitting there proper as Bill. So that's he still does that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Tell us about
Unverified.
your dad, what he came to Cape Charles to do.
Yeah. Well, I can't say exactly, but I suspect, I found records of him working in the Tazla railroad station as a clerk or something like that. And then there's a picture of him around somewhere in the early 20s in Jim Lewis's book. There's the Roundhouse Crew, I think they call themselves, or something, but it's maybe a picture of 20 or 30 railroad workers, and he's in that picture. So he was working in Cape Charles for the railroad, where the shops are down this way, at that time. So and I've got other pictures of him in Cape Charles, sort of in that era. So I suspect, I don't think he would have commuted from Anancock to Cape Charles every day to work or something like that. And so he probably lived in a boarding house or somewhere like that. And then at some point he met my mother, but that was all in the 30s. And they got married and built a house in 41, which is where Jana lives today. So I remember Dad taking us down to the railroad shops when we were little kids, and I remember he took us to, two things I remember. I remember it had these columns in there with a dispenser on there with salt tablets, because they didn't have air conditioning back then, you know, and everybody sweated a lot. So they had salt tablets, and he also, three things. There was an overhead crane. I think we went up, he let us climb up in it with him. That was like what they call a gantry, sort of like this one in here.
Bridge crane.
Only it was bigger and it would travel back and forth and it could lift big locomotive stuff. So I remember we rode on that. And then there was a little spigot down at the bottom you turn on, and instead of water coming out of it, oil came out of it. And I thought, boy, this is neat, you know, for a kid, you know.
Oh, gosh.
And then one time he let us push the button. The fire siren went off at noon every day, you know. And there was a siren out there by the railroad offices, their shops. And he let me push the button one time for noon fire whistle.
Oh.
He died working on, not on the job, but he had a stroke or something. They took him over to Kecoughtan, the Veterans Hospital, and that's where he died, you know, a couple days later. So.
Yeah, he was a veteran of World War I, which I think we talked about a little bit. He was in France.
It's like an ambulance corps or something to that effect. We've got pictures of him, you know, motorcycle.
The only thing I can remember about that is I can remember him, he had a Chevrolet coupe, and I can remember us riding in that, and we must have been, well, it had to have been
Less than 5.
Yeah, it had to have been no later than 1945, I guess, because there was a prisoner of war camp down at Oyster, near Oyster. And he rode us by there, and I remember he hollered out something in German, you know, and they were shaking their fist and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, my gosh.
So I got that little memory about that. And then I can remember a lot of times when he'd come home from work, the car had a running board on it, and he'd let us stand on the running board and drive us down to the beach, you know, and then we'd get off and play on the beach or something like that. So I got little snippets of memory like that, but not, you know, not a lot of extensive stuff, unfortunately. But,
You know, we were calling them dirty Germans, I think. Turns out I think they were Italian. But that's why they were mad.
really made him mad.
Okay.
Okay. Like I said, Dad was in World War I in France, and I've got a picture of him here. He was in the ambulance corps right here. I don't know if you can see that or not. And then, is it in the picture?
Is the article in the back?
Okay, yeah. And then if you ever wonder how come where Jan and I got our good looks from, this is it says the Anancock High School, wrong way. John Cornick writes from France that Jonas Neville of Anancock is the handsomest man he has ever seen overseas, regardless of nationality. That's a pretty big spread there. There it is in writing. Whether you read it or not, I won't give you too much time to read that.
Do you remember any unusual things at school when you were coming along, like pranks?
Like
When
what?
you got older, like pranks that you played?
One of our very best friends was Jim Lewis, called him Louie. And I still laugh days looking back and thinking about things he did and said, you know, that just get me laughing. He had a way, one of the things, he was very athletic. In fact, he was there, I think he was their quarterback on the football team the year I was a senior, or we were seniors. But anyhow, at football practice, we'd all be running around the field doing laps, you know, and then some of us were a little more clumsy than others. And Mickey Chambers was not overly coordinated, nice guy and all that. But Louis could run along beside him and kind of get in step with him. And then at a certain point where Mickey had his one leg behind the other, you know, he'd tap it So you hardly even know he did it. Of course, boom, he'd go down and then Louis would look over him and, what's wrong with you? You know, and keep on running, you know. But he did stuff like that all the time, you know. He was just, one time, we were, this was after we were, I guess we were in college then. I'm not really sure, but we were riding around in the car.
It was in your van you're talking about.
And we had some liquor that we had purchased somewhere and had it hidden in the backyard of our house. And we were riding around in the car, and so we decided we were going to get it and maybe tap into it. So we had to be quiet. It was getting towards dark, and our next door neighbor, Gwen Hunter, was sort of very watchful, you know. Nosy would maybe be a too strong a word, but anyhow, things that went on. And of course, if she saw anything, it went straight to mom, you know, and that kind of thing. So anyhow, we were very careful pulling into the alley where the skunk patrol house is, where Banjo did his little doorknob thing, which we can talk about. But anyhow, so we were very quiet, snuck in there, and when we pulled up, I was driving, and Louis was in the middle seat, and Jan was in the riding shotgun, and he opened the door to get out to retrieve this liquor we had hidden. And when he did, he grabbed a hold of Jan's outside leg, and then with his elbow, he pushed the horn and hit Jan, and Jan's falling out of the door. We were trying to the yard while the horn's blowing, the lights come on.
Of course, we're trying to keep Mama from hearing that we were back there.
But he was all the time doing things like that. He could do stuff to embarrass you, but you didn't mind it. You know, it was kind of like, it was just funny. So I'd say he was probably our very best friend. If I had to name one person, I mean, we had a lot of them. The group that we hung around with, I really enjoyed it. He was just
Kid Charles was such a, or, you know, everybody was so close. They still are, really, but.
Yeah, they had little kids, you know, we had, I'll call them gangs, but they weren't really gangs. It was, we all hung around together and did stuff. And we found an old boat down on the beach, you know, and fixed it up, found who it belonged to, and they said we could have it. The bottom needed some work. And we'd row out and go fishing right up there with old hand lines, you know, no rod and reel, just a string wound up on a stick, you know, and a hook and sinker. And we had some good times.
Yeah.
We could actually catch fish then. There were all kinds of fish out here.
okay. I think we were talking about some Cape Charles, their little group called the Skunk Patrol was actually what they were called. And Frank Fitchie was their titular head of the Skunk Patrol. And he and Jan and myself and Billy Vick, Parker Forrest, Bon Dishru, we had a token girl, Joe Bull, was on there. And who were left out?
I think that's all I can
But anyway, we had a lot of different things we did. Nothing big. You know, we had a whittling club. We'd sit under a street light at night there in front of Frank Carter's house and whittle on a piece of wood and stuff like that. And somebody made up a little paper handkerchief with pine cones in it or something, and a rope. You could swing it around and throw it up in the air in front of a car or something like that and holler spookaboo. And one of my finest pictures I came across, which hopefully will be included if I can find it. There's a picture Billy Vick had. He was also a member, if I didn't say that. But Billy Vick had a little garage behind his house, and we used to put on the puppet shows back there. And one of my jobs, maybe Junius's, we were to go around and pick up customers, like kids that are younger than us, and ride them on a bicycle. And we'd charge them a penny or something to go see this puppet show, you know. And,
potato heads.
but anyhow, there was a picture that was taken of the puppet show group, you know, not the kids, but just the group. And then it's Billy Vick.
You got it right here, don't you?
No, it's on my camera, and I can't have my phone. I'm gonna have to give it to a little bit later to turn that in. But anyhow, there's a picture of Frank and Parker Forrest and Bon Dishru and Billy Vick. And Billy Vick was his mother. Miss Vick was Marion Vick was their English teacher. Very straight, nice lady. But anyhow, and unfortunately, Billy died at a very early age there. But anyhow, but he was very straight and all that kind of stuff. And in this picture, they got these four guys clustered around as a huge Seagram 7 bottle of liquor. And it just looks so out of place for him to be in that picture.
Right.
But we had, like I said, we had a lot of neat little things we did, that were, we used to go out in the woods and build forts, we could go there where Bayshore Concrete is now. You go back in there and what we call a blood field and cut down a pine tree and use the limb from it to make a little fort sit there and maybe have a little campfire or something like that and spend the night or not, and things like that. So.
And go to the movies. Did you go to the movies?
Go to the
Saturdays?
movies, and I can always remember if we saw a really scary movie walking back home. Of course, both of the movies were on Mason Avenue, Front Street, and we had to turn at the bank where the bank was and walk down Pine Street, and the street lights got very scarce and dark. And so going back along there, I'd love to maybe see something hanging on a limb like a piece of a mummy wrap laying on a tree or something, thinking the mummy's ghost was coming after us or something, So we'd run all the way home pretty much, or make sure we got there quick.
It's cold and windy when you went around that corner too.
Yeah.
But remember also Francis Wendell, here they had a knee-high bottling company before they went into the beer business, I think. And one Saturday afternoon, I don't know, it was once a month, it was periodically, they would show a free movie for kids, and they would have free knee-high drinks and maybe even little bags of popcorn. I forgot what, but I mean, all the kids used to go to it, and it was free. It was a really nice little thing that they did.
Oh, that's cool. Was that when, did they have two movie theaters?
Yeah, the Palace and the Radium were there both.
Yeah.
The Palace was built, I think, around 1942 or 3, somewhere in that neighborhood. The Radium, I think, was older than that.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure. But at the time I'm talking about, they were both in operation.
Uh-huh. That's, and they used to actually show cartoons and the movies.
Three Stooges. I love the Three Stooges.
Oh, yeah.
I get laughing so hard. One time I fell right out of my chair and
When you were in high school, I saw somebody talking about I guess it was the principal's car, picking it up and putting it where he couldn't drive it out.
Shorty Letson, I think it was.
Too cool.
Yeah, that was before us. And
That was before you.
these were older kids, that
Jimmy Harrison probably was involved in that.
Yeah.
Maybe possibly Lloyd Kellum and some of that,
Oh, yeah.
the more miscreant.
Uh-huh.
I think he had a little
But y'all
Studebaker or something.
Y'all could appreciate it.
It wasn't a real heavy car, but if you get 4 or 6, fairly hefty guys, they picked it up and they put it. There was a section of the school in the back where there was like 2 wings and they were real close together. And they took the car and put it in between the 2 wings, so you couldn't go anywhere. You could back up or go ahead about a foot on either end.
What they did, I was lifted up and pulled it up.
Oh, geez. Oh, that's fun.
They said they did not. I'm not sure this is about this one exactly, but Marion Vick, we were just talking about, she was our English teacher, and they would pick on her some. And she had an old 48 Plymouth or something, I remember. And anyway, the boys jacked her car up after school, but before she came out to go home, they had jacked her car up and put blocks under the rear wheels. So when she got in it to drive off, the wheels would just spin. She couldn't tell what was wrong. So she went back into school and called Bird, her husband, Bird Vick, who was upset. He didn't want to have to worry about all this kind of junk. And meanwhile, the kids went out and removed the blocks while she was in doing the photo. So when he comes back out, there's nothing wrong. He said, "What's wrong with you?"
What's wrong with that one happened?
Yeah,
The teachers, who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, Miss Beatty.
Yeah.
Miss Beatty.
Yes, she
Yeah.
was. She was
And the librarian, who was the
Ms.
librarian?
Ames, yeah. Lena Ames.
I remember Bob talking about she would put the stamper between her fingers and crack him on the knuckles. So I'm sure
Yeah.
he needed that. Probably some more too needed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But sometimes, her more general expression, she'd have a pencil and when she started tapping it, you knew you better shut up and do something there. And I can remember we taught Jan and myself and Louis and Billy Hamilton, I think, took French under her, and they had a vocabulary list there that each, that they'd want us, she said, now you pronounce the first word and you the second something. Well, and one of the words was COMMODE. Well, nobody wanted to say commode,
Right.
Well, I forgot whoever it was got it. That might have been Louis. I can't remember. But it was commode. The French. It probably had nothing to do with a commode, but anyhow,
Right.
the French. We never did. I got by with D's, and I was tickled to death with that, as I remember.
Imagine being embarrassed to say that now.
No. Yeah.
You know, you talk about playing pranks and everything. I remember Louis was really big on that kind of stuff. And J.R. Outen, who still lives down in the county now, he was kind of like a teacher's pet guy, you know. And I can remember we were sitting in the English class one day with the dog. We said, let us bring the dog sometime, you know. And they didn't care. The dog would sleep under the table or whatever. It had nothing to do with this, but at any rate, Ms. Vic asked JR to take a bunch of stuff down to the principal's office, and it was like a can full of pencils and stuff like that or whatever. So as he's going, yes ma'am, as he's going out the door, then Louis catches his foot, you know, and trips him. And you could, all you could hear was this big crash, and this single pencil came rolling back in the room. And Ms. Vic says, Louis! And he said, I know what?
You're right in the place.
He would always do stuff like that.
That's cute.
I've got a couple pictures. This is going back a little bit, but I feel like it needs to be documented. I have a letter here, and I have a picture. This is Junius and I, not far to the hospital, and Mama's holding us there.
Oh, that's cute.
Of course it is, very. Anyhow, she's written a letter here. She says, and this is just to show, this is Mama's handwriting.
Wrote it to her sister.
Yes. It says, my little boys are mighty precious to me. They are not so very pretty, but they are improving each day and gaining weight. Well, Junius and I found out in another letter that it was discovered that we were both born breech. It's documented. And so Junius theorized from that she was looking at the wrong end of the baby when she wrote this letter here.
Right.
So just a little aside there. Here's a picture of Mom and Dad. I don't know if you had any of those there.
To Mom and Dad.
Yeah. I don't think that. And here's another picture here.
Oh, you were.
Junius.
Oh my goodness, look at the curls.
We had blonde
Mom-
curly
blonde
hair. Still got a
curly
lock
hair,
of it.
Really?
Yeah, Mom cut it off. We got it in a scrapbook somewhere.
So
I don't think we got a haircut till we were like 5 years old or something.
Mhm.
Mom kept it long.
There are pictures here that I had that were a little later on in our backyard there. Then myself, we had a dog named Skippy. It was one of our early dogs there, and our bicycles and all kinds. So that was kind of a typical type of way we'd be, ride our bikes and that kind of stuff and explore. It was neat because we could disappear at lunchtime or after breakfast and spend the day walking over the Bloodfield, going down to Plantation Creek, walking and take our BB guns and ride our bikes or get in a boat, ride over to Sandy Island, paddle over to Sandy Island. I mean, you've got a lot of freedom. And I'm sure, our mom was worried about us sometime, but we never.
Right. You'd take off and go and come home when you were hungry.
Yeah.
That's,
And our friends were the same way. I mean, they all had pretty much that same freedom, and so it was an excellent way to grow up.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that's one of the things about Cape Charles I really, really loved and look back on was how neat a place it was. I mean, we had bad times sometimes too, but nothing overall, looking at life growing up for a kid in Cape Charles, I don't think you could have been anywhere better. Maybe at the time I wasn't thinking that, but looking back on it, our friends and the things we did, the Boy Scouts, we were all in the Boy Scouts. That was a big deal. We'd go camping. Bud Taylor was the chairman Scoutmaster, and he'd get the other Scoutmasters together. We'd go down to Kipton Peak and camp out where I guess it's where the administrative building is now for the bridge tunnel. It was Wise Hall, where Wise Hall was. And we spent a week down there in these 8-man tents, with the Sheridan troop and us, Eastville, Naswadix, all the local Boy Scout troops. And that was neat to get to meet other kids, and become friends with, lifelong friends in a lot of cases. So, like I say, the things that we experienced, we didn't have all the fancy stuff.
But you had a good childhood.
Yeah, we had movies, we had friends, we had a great place for adventures for kids and all that kind of stuff. And riding bikes, roller skating, even school pep rallies and stuff like that, and football games. And like I say, it was just, I'm looking back, I could never have had a better life, I don't think, than we've
And
had.
the beach right there and
Mhm.
fishing.
A lot of
and-
stuff to do.
And the fact that the town is still here, and mostly what it was
Right.
like, it went through some bad times and some good times. When we were coming along, it was still in the good times with the ferries running and all. That was always a
Yeah.
great thing, to take the ferries and the steamers and watch the steam engines come in and just things like that.
It was bustling
It was.
back then, because
yeah.
I can remember, like once a month, I'd get into Cape Charles. It was like being in the city.
Yeah.
When Mom was growing up, she would say, they were teenagers, they would go on a Saturday, get on the ferry right down here at the dock, right here in town, and get off in Norfolk, and the ferry docked near downtown Norfolk, so they'd go shopping or whatever they did, then get back on the ferry that evening and come back home, and that was a lot to be able to do in those days for young girls to be able to go shopping, just to spend a day of it. It didn't cost much of anything,
Yeah. That's,
It was kind of an interesting thing. But one thing he forgot to tell you, we got kicked out of the Boy Scouts, but it was for something I swear to God, we did not do it.
I also swear we did.
But the restaurant, there was a restaurant called Griff's. Matter of fact, it was John Griffith's
oh, yeah.
parents that ran it. And there was a kind of teenage hangout when we were kids,
I remember going there.
Yeah, they had a jukebox and a grill and all that kind of stuff. But the lady that ran the kitchen in the back said that Bill and I had gone back there and peed on her potatoes. She had a bag of potatoes back there. But we did not do that. At any rate, we decided we were getting older and said it was a good time to be getting out anyway. So
Didn't fight it, but that was a
Little-
untrue.
Bob wasn't with you, was he? Maybe.
no, it might have been him and Parker that did that.
Could have been.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but the hangouts, the biggies were Savages and Lloyds or
Yeah.
Griffs. And
Griff's was right next to where
What,
Savages was on the corner there, right? And
yeah,
Griff's was right next to it.
Wilson
across the street, there
Yeah.
was like Wilson's department store,
Yeah.
and there's a little place that Frank Wendell has now. Well, that was where I think
That
Griff's.
was
that's what Griffs.
Yeah. Then next to that's the coffee house, currently.
Yeah. And there was down the street there was another little place that was McMath's.
Jack Magnet, yeah.
Yeah, Jack Mackworth. They called it Mackworth.
Yeah,
I loved the floor in there when I was a little girl.
The little black
Pull
and
the
white.
stool across and it would make noise.
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah. I remember they had model airplanes. David Langford built some of them, and David White, I think, built some, and they would each criticize the other one. One of them said the guy used too much glue on his, and stuff like that. But they were neat looking. We'd go into the store and get a Coke and something like
Root
that.
beer floats were good.
Yeah, and Jack Mackman, he ran it, and it was his. I think it was his weight. They had weight machines in the front of a lot of those things where you could stand on the scales and get your weight, but you had to put money in.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, I do remember that.
Yeah, well,
I don't
Jan-
remember the airplanes. I must have been too infatuated with the floor.
Yeah,
But the weight machine Bill's talking about, there's one down in front of in Rayfield's now. When you go in the entryway there on the right,
Uh-huh.
so they got the slots with the months on them, and you put when you stand on it, you can see the little thing move, but you can't read it. Where your weight is. But if you put a penny or a dime or whatever it is in there, the little plate moves back, and you can see your fortune can be told and your weight and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And somebody told me one time, said, you don't have to be wasting your money putting that machine to get, I'll show you how you can get it. It don't cost anything. He went inside the store, got a cup of water, came back out and dumped the water in the slots.
Oh.
And the weight of the water tripped the mechanism. And I told somebody about that one day. And after I told her, she said, I feel like my life has been enriched by this knowledge.
save that thought in case you ever need it. When you went away to college, that was a good time or a bad time?
Oh, it was a sad time for us, I think, because we went from being able to do whatever you want, went to military school at Virginia Tech.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember my Uncle Lynn Mears took us out there. We didn't have a car from when Dad died in 1947 until 57 when we got our driver's license. But you couldn't have a car the first year anyway. So Uncle took us out there. And I can remember seeing that old Dodge go across the hill and the taillights disappear, and I felt so sad.
Yeah.
But anyway, you had to wear this wool uniform that itched like crazy, and it was hot, and it was in the early fall and everything, but we got used to it. Yeah, we made some good friends there too. I mean, even at that, the military part wasn't fun. I decided right then I didn't really necessarily, I wasn't a military person.
Right.
But we still met some neat friends there. And even though you were restricted a lot, first year you were called rats. And when you were in the dorms, you had to, if you were a rat, you had to hang to the wall with your arm scraping just about, and arms real tight down at your side and eyes straight ahead. And if upper classmen saw you, what do you call it, glancing? What do you call it? Anyhow,
Yeah,
you didn't have your eyes straight ahead. If you looked over to see who it was coming down there, he'd stick you. You'd get a demerit for that. And then for every demerit, you had to sit, a half hour in a chair in detention out in the hall on Saturdays, so.
Oh, my goodness.
Something like that, So it was, but still, even at that, we met some good friends, on weekends that we do stuff with, and some we actually ended up going home with and spend a weekend with their families or something like that.
Yeah.
And had some road trips and stuff like that.
Good experience.
Football
when
games.
you look back at it.
Yeah,
right?
if you were in the Corps, you had to go to the football games on Thanksgiving when usually Virginia Tech played in Roanoke at the, what was it, the Tobacco Bowl, or no, that was in
Harvest
Richmond.
Bowl, I think.
Harvest Bowl,
Yeah, we had to march in a parade down
And,
the street.
but then we could
Roanoke.
go home after that.
Mhm.
The VMI cadets couldn't; they had to go back to VMI, so that was kind of cool.
They really had it tough. Yeah,
Yeah, so
more so than us.
yeah, but that wasn't a bad time. I would say overall, looking back at it.
I can remember an event that Brother Bill was rooming with a fellow named Bill Hamilton, who was one of our classmates here at Cape Charles. His dad was a farmer out here. And the Big Daddy, we called him, because he was a large person, was getting ready to go somewhere for the weekend. And he had his suitcase packed.
Visit his best girl.
And Bill and Brother Bill Hamilton shared a room there in the dorm. And the Big Daddy had his suitcase all packed and open and ready to put a few last things in and shut it down before he left the next morning, I think. So later on that evening, Brother Bill had come back to the room, and there had been some drinking involved, I think. And next thing you know, he woke up and he sat up in the bed because he felt sick to his stomach. And
I was in the upper bunk.
And
We
he-
had bunks, Big Daddy was in the lower bunk, and I was in the upper bunk. So I had to vault under the bed.
And he threw up into Big Daddy's suitcase.
The sink, he had the suitcase over right beside the sink, and I didn't quite get to the sink.
The Big Daddy was upset.
Imagine. Bob always said get the top bunk. Maybe that's why. Then when you came home from college, what did you? Oh, all right.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
When did you come home in the summer when you were in college?
We were both on what they call a co-op program. The college was on quarter system, so you'd spend a quarter of this. You got on at your last 2 years of college, and you would work a quarter at some job that was related to what you were studying, and you would go to school a quarter, alternate until you finished up. So it made, instead of 4 years, it made 5 years college for most of us. At any rate, I ended up going to Wallops Island. I was lucky. My mom had a friend up there and asked about if they had jobs and it turns out they did have a program for what they call co-op students. So I ended up going through that and ended up getting work there and worked there for 38 years.
So I didn't.
That's cool. And Bill went to move to Maryland.
Well, I did co-op work too also. I was in Baltimore, which biggest thing I learned from that, I think, is I never wanted to live in a city. I just didn't like city life. The people that I lived with, one of our fellow students there at Virginia Tech, his grandmother, he lived with his grandmother and his mother in a house in a section of Baltimore called Highland Town, which was mostly Italian and stuff, but nice people, really was. They had row houses and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it wasn't a really glitzy place, but it was, they kept the houses well and had little, community stores and things. So it was good in that way, and they were very friendly. But anyhow, we had a car, we split it. He'd take it for 3 months, and I'd take it for 3 months, or I can't remember how we did it. Not 3 months, but maybe a month at a time or 2 weeks. Anyhow, I had to catch a bus a lot of times to work at Western Electric, and just the whole thing, city life, riding buses. I just didn't care for it. And working in a factory, it was okay. The people were nice and all that, but I just decided what I really wanted to do when I got out. I wanted to come back and work on the Eastern Shore. I never wanted to leave the Eastern Shore, but so I was going to apply at Wallops too, but they wouldn't hire but one family, from there at the time. So I tried. I tried Norfolk Shipyard, Newport News, or Newport News Shipyard, I guess it is. And I just decided it was the traffic getting in and out of the place, and I just decided I really don't want to live this kind of life. Nothing wrong with Newport News necessarily. I'd rather live there in Baltimore, but still. So anyhow, I forgot who suggested to me to try Delmarva Power, local power company, and I did. And they had an opening in Exmoor for an engineer, which was unusual because, in fact, when I went there and sat down with my boss and talked a little bit, he said, "You realize you're not going to be able to stay here forever." He said, "It'd be maybe a year or two, and then you're going to have to move to Salisbury or somewhere like that." So that's what happened. But it turns out it was good. There were good people to work for and all that kind of stuff. And when I went to Salisbury, I was worried about, oh my God, I will leave the Eastern Shore and all that kind of stuff. Well, the people up there were just as nice as they were down here. And it was the people I've worked with and others lived in I bought a trailer from Cliff Thibodeau when he ran the plant, when he built a house. And I moved it. I wouldn't borrow the money to buy it. Allison Mills wouldn't lend me the money. I lived 2 doors down, or 3 doors down there, and he wouldn't. And I had a job with Delmarva Power, and he wouldn't lend me the money to buy it. It was $2,000 or something like that. So the bank in Exmoor did. And anyhow, I bought this house trailer and set it up on Occohannock Creek, just past Exmoor. And we lived there about a year, and then I had to move to Salisbury.
You had gotten married by this time.
Yeah.
Dawn appeared in the picture.
Yes. Oh, yeah. By the time I had my Delmarva job, we started dating. I think it was her sophomore year, and then she moved through school a lot quicker than I did, as I recall there. But anyhow, when we left, when we got married, she still had another quarter, I think, in Radford before she got out. But then she got a job teaching in Northampton. And then when we moved to Salisbury, she got a job up there. My boss up there was able to intervene and get her a job in the school system up there. And everywhere I moved from there to Delaware, and then back to Salisbury, and then back to Virginia, and back to Salisbury. I was all over the place every 5 years or something. But I found out in that, like in Delaware, I never wanted to go over there. I thought it was all these Yankees and everything. And we went to, we're in what you call lower Delaware, Sussex County. We were right on the borderline between Sussex and Kent County, which was the southern 2 counties. Newcastle and Wilmington were the northern part above the canal. And those people were just as good as we were, just like us. And so I had a really enjoyable career working with Delmarva Power. So I can't complain about that at all. They were good to me, and it was just a.
Did you get married around the same time, both of you?
You got married
I got married
maybe a year old.
maybe a year before he did.
First.
Yeah. He had a big fancy church wedding and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't afford that. He'd get all that big money from the big government money.
Government money, yeah.
And so we got married in Snow Hill. I just went to the Baptist preacher's house and got
People
married.
used to go up there and get married.
Yeah, so that's what we did. But it worked. So, yeah.
So you wouldn't trade what you were working at. It sounds like you had good.
No, that was a great. I enjoyed my job very much.
Yeah.
It was good people to work with and fun projects and.
I think his group was much more laid back than mine, but my group was also pretty laid back. They were good people and a lot of fun. You could have fun. I can remember one instance there, Halloween. We'd get all dressed up for Halloween. This was when I was working in Westover. And I can remember one of the guys, Charlie Birch, who had a union issue and something was going on at the Westover office there. And anyhow, and our district manager in Westover, Tim Smith, he had a witch's hat on and all that kind of stuff, and witch's face and all that kind of stuff. And anyhow, I remember, and we were all dressed up out in the office too, most of us. And I can remember going in there to see Tim about something. And when I went in there, Charlie was in there with this union issue he had, And here's Tim sitting at the desk listening to it with his witch's outfit on. And then I can remember one year a delegation from Wallops, Jan brought a delegation from Wallops and come up and visited at Halloween there and all that kind of stuff and circulated around the office.
Right.
I mean, they were
Fun times.
We had a bunch there that would do that, and my boss was very strict, the day's work for a day's pay and all this kind of stuff. So what we would do, we would take off. We'd be on leave so that he couldn't fuss with. We'd come into work anyway, but we'd be on leave, and that was one of the things we did. Our delegation went up to his office.
Had a conflagration there.
Wallops has sure grown. Because I can
remember
it's one time they were afraid it was going to close. It was a Navy base originally, right?
Yeah, it was built during World War II. And, the Navy, and then after that, in '58, when NASA was formed, they took it over and had it ever since. Langley, I think, ran it at first for a while, but we ended up with Greenbelt, Goddard Space Center at Greenbelt. We were part of them, and they did mostly what they call sounding rockets, where they were experiments that could be conducted in outer space at a much lower cost than a satellite or something. And because most of the rockets that we used to launch those experiments were free. They were government surplus. They were military rockets that had gone, they were obsolete. They had better designs later on. So we got them pretty much for free, I think. I always call them the Sanford and Son Rocket Ship Company, because we dealt mostly in used stuff and everything. But it was a very efficient way for scientists to test their experiments before they put them on a much more expensive satellite. So worked with that. Most of the time I was there, that's what I worked on, was what they call sounding rockets.
A lot of jobs too. Created a lot of jobs,
Yeah, good jobs. I mean, they had good benefits, and like I said, the people were great to work with. The work environment was good, and
we were talking about the carnival down at the beachfront. I can barely remember it because I didn't get in Cape Charles that often, but it was right down on the corner there by the hotel, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's where it was. Before those houses were built there now on Bay Avenue, that was a big empty sand lot. And they'd have a Ferris wheel and all kinds of stuff.
Do you remember the Cool Corner?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was there too. But yeah, go ahead, Julius. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, when they would do that, they would do fireworks. So they always had it. The 4th of July would be included, in the open dates they were open, and they did fireworks and all that kind of stuff. And they had one of the funny things, the wheel that we've got out. We've got a what do they call it? wheel that you spin. It goes
Wheel
clack,
of
clack, clack.
Fortune type of wheel.
No, it was a gambling thing. You put your money down on the number, and if your number came up, you won something or whatever.
Won some big
Right.
bucks.
Yeah, I can't think what they call it right now, but it's it's typical carnival stuff back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, But we've got the one the fire company gave us when they had to clear out some stuff from their building downtown here. So we've got the thing, but they had announcements. You'd have a guy on a speaker, and the guy that did it was a really kind of a laid-back guy. He liked to talk and everything. And one time they were doing stuff, and he didn't realize the microphone was still on, and some of the stuff they were talking about, everybody was going, "Woo!"
Censored.
Yeah. But that was sort of typical, of stuff like that. And they give away a car. They had like an old Sears and Roebuck.
Henry J.
Henry J. was a car that was made by Sears and Roebuck, I think. And they would give one of those away as the main prize when you bought these raffle tickets and everything. So.
I remember they set the fireworks off one year there, and the fire siren went off while they were setting them off. So they all took off and go to the fire. And then they came back and finished them up. Everybody was gone, I think, by the time they got back. But anyhow.
Yeah, they finished lighting them off, and there was nobody to watch them.
Nobody out there.
And I can remember one time, too, we heard this gigantic explosion in the middle of the afternoon on the 4th. There's boom, it kind of shook the whole town. What was that? Well, it turned out that was the grand finale. It had gone off early. Somebody pushed the wrong button or something.
But that was after the fire department. That's when we had professionals.
Yeah, I think they had a professional. Yeah.
So much for the grand finale.
Yeah.
So those carnivals were down there next to the Northampton Hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
they're-
That empty lot there, yes. Or was empty at the time.
There was one at Cheapside, too.
Yes.
I remember
They had a
going.
hoochie coochie show.
Big draw for us kids.
Yeah,
Young.
we heard about it. We never went. We heard about it.
Yeah, we were told about that.
And I remember, that makes me remember to go back to when you were in school, Al Rain's store right
Oh,
there.
yeah,
And
yeah.
everybody would go get,
Yep.
You got candy and
Buy
drinks and
candy,
I think he even sold sandwiches and stuff like that, So, school didn't have a cafeteria, so at lunchtime, you either went home if you lived in town or you brought your lunch with you, or some people would go there, and there was a Ewell store that was the next block down from Al Rain's store. And I think you could get lunch type stuff at those two places if you wanted.
Yeah. Well, we went to Savage's a lot of times.
And Griff's
Griff's, yeah, both of them.
had a spiced ham sandwich.
Yeah,
Was
that was
very,
the biggies.
big
Coke and
deal.
spiced hams. Vanilla Coke, a spiced ham sandwich with mayonnaise.
that was the good days, right? That was the days.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about working with Jim Lewis on the book, Cape Charles, a Railroad Town. You all helped him write that, right?
Well,
help get
he
his
wrote
story.
it. No, he did all the research. I was a gopher. At that time, he was in the beginning stages of Parkinson's, which continually got worse. And we would sit together and talk a lot about what'd be neat to have in the book and different incidences and things we remembered and stuff like that. To go in there, I'd help him gather information and stuff like that. But basically, he put together the book right by himself, and I think he did an excellent job, in my opinion, of it as far as portraying the town and its history and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I'd go around to his house there, and we'd sit and just, like I say, just discuss
Yeah.
different instances. Do you remember this? And then he'd go research it, and put it together and all that kind of stuff. So, that was he passed away. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years after he finished the book.
The
Unfortunately.
book is still for sale here in the
Yeah.
gift shops.
Yeah, yeah. And it's pretty accurate. There's a few things in there, like there is with any book. You find out different information. I think there's something about maybe one of the banks isn't exactly correct. And, but you can take almost any book. But considering the research that he did, he not only did the book, but in the library, there's several volumes of stuff in there that he did on research for the book and other things too. That's there. It's got a lot of like censuses and property records and things like that he also put together. So he did a
Left his
monumental
legacy.
job. He absolutely did. Like I say, he was an exceptional person as far as I was concerned. Very shy with the ladies and all that kind of stuff, you know. But he was, like I say, he just his sense of humor and the way he did things, and he was just a great friend to have, you know, to hang out with and do stuff with, and I really miss him.
Some of the things I remember that he did, he was always messing with Tommy Scott. Tommy was very sensitive about everything, and Tommy was always like an intermediary between the guys and the girls. You know, if one girl liked some guy or something, he would tastefully let her know, you know, tactfully let him know that this is what you should do, and all that kind of stuff and everything. But Louis really worked him over. You know, I remember we stayed at his house one time, Tommy's house, and he lived on a farm down here near Plantation Creek, and we had gone. It was after our bedtime, so everybody had kind of gone to bed, and there was the bedroom had evidently belonged to one of Tommy's sisters before we were there, and it had a big container of like talcum powder or something with a great big powder puff in it and everything. And I don't know whether we were making a bunch of noise or something, but Tommy comes in the room and said, we needed to be quiet or something. And Louis got that powder puff and said, whoop, and hit him right across the face with it. And Tommy had red curly hair and that red hair on the inside of his mouth and pink eyes. And when he'd get mad, he would hiss, you know, and he'd start breathing through his teeth.
I remember you could see that cake powder in his eyes. You know?
That was a typical Louis.
It was a lot of drama.
One time they had school was dismissed because of broke down furnace, real cold day, and I didn't with them. I heard about this story separately, but they went up to the Eastville Sand Hills, which is where it's a park now. Like I can't think of what's it called, Savage Neck Dunes, I think it is. But there was big dunes. At any rate, the boys all went up there, and they were climbing up top of this sand dune, and they got about halfway up, and there was a frozen chicken, kind of frozen in the sand and everything, you know, dead chicken, and Louis picked it up and hit Tommy in the back of the head with it.
I think he tripped him first. He went down.
Yeah, he tripped him. He had him on the ground, and then he threw the chicken on top of him. And Tommy would start hissing and carrying. But he was a master at stuff like that.
Those memories are priceless.
We used to go, this is back a little further when we were younger there, but Margaret and Ann Barnes, I don't know if you remember them or not.
Yeah,
But anyhow, they
Ann
were
was
twin
fun.
sisters, and they were exactly 3 years older than we were. They were born on December 15th, 1938? Yeah, we were born 41. And they lived right behind us. They lived on Front Street, and we lived on Randolph, and the alley between was where they lived. We could throw a rock and hit them from our yards, you know. But anyway, they were 3 years older, so we weren't close like that. But many years, anyhow. G.F. Hogg's mother, Eva Hogg, they owned some cottages down at Smith's Beach, and she let us have one of those for a week. So we'd go down there with Margaret and Ann and Jan and myself, and then sometimes our cousins from Newport News and Norfolk, and spend a week down there just at Smith's Beach. And that was another neat thing that we did that everybody didn't have the opportunity to do.
Nice memory. Yeah, I remember them, the girls. One was married to Tony Costa, right?
No, that might have been Ann. Downing.
Not Betty Jean.
Bip Downing, maybe.
Tony Costa. I remember that. Yeah, he was a motorcycle guy.
Yeah.
Wasn't
And Chief Sylvia.
Yeah.
he? Yeah.
One was married to. Seemed like one was married to.
One was married to Crumb.
Yeah, Gene Crumb.
Gene Crumb.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think it was Ann was married to him. I'm not sure.
Margaret, let's see, who was she married to? I can't remember now. I wish we had spent more time with them.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time in high school, 3 years was a big difference. But as
Yeah.
we grew older,
Right.
It was they were really, I love their sense of humor,
Yeah.
and they were just, I just wish we had more time. I remember in the paper one year, they put a little ad, you know, that they'd forgotten their birthday, or we'd forgotten it too, or something, you know, from the older twins to the younger twins, some little cute little thing, you know. But they were a lot of fun to hang around with down at Smith's Beach and stuff like that. And we'd go out in the water, with swimming, and take a rod and reel and cast type, walk out on the sandbar and cast type. We had a little aluminum boat down at the Gulf at the end of Smith's Beach there, and it got some pictures of us all sitting in the boat there, and of course your parents were there too. And it was just, you know, like I said, everything I can think of, like when we were growing up, was just almost like a fairy tale, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I guess you forget the bad times, maybe, and remember the good ones, but I would say I remember a lot more good times than I do
Right.
bad
Kids
times,
don't
for
get
sure.
the chance to do that as much anymore, you know.
I think
No.
Ann was telling me one time about when they were really little kids. It was no big deal. They had grandparents that lived up near Parksley, and it was no big deal. The mama would put them on the train down here, and the grandparents would pick them up at Parksley, you know. And this one Christmas, they had gotten for Christmas a makeup kit. Each one had a little makeup kit. And she told me when they got off the train, the grandparents said they looked like a couple of little whores. They had some makeup on.
They're all tarted up. Aaron Baldwin said they were all tarted up.
That was her words.
Eloise was talking about her mother grew up in Drummondtown, and her mother was a school teacher. Her first job was Tangier and Chincoteague.
Wow.
But when she was younger, they would take the train down to Cape Charles to the dance hall.
Legion Hall, probably.
So where was that?
Legion Hall, I suspect. It was right at the base of the hump. You may remember it. It was a big 3-story building. It was the old Legion Hall.
It was made out of wood and it burned down.
I think it was. Oh, it wasn't one down by the.
There was another one down before that. Down, you know.
Oh, the old ferry dock.
'Cause
What
it
year was this
came
you're
on
talking
the
about?
train. Eloise's mother, she was born in early 1900s, so
It might have
probably
been.
would have been around
It might
the
have been
20s,
the
maybe?
World War One.
Yeah, the Legion Hall was built right after World War. I guess I don't know whether it was built or it was a railroad building that was moved there, but I think it was established around right after World War One. But that was right at the base. As you were coming across the hump, coming into town on your left, the lot's still empty there, but the building burned back in the 50s or 60s maybe. I recall on fire.
Yeah, 60s, I think.
Finally ended up tearing it down, but it was a big 3-story building.
But they had a dance hall
Well,
down by the.
yeah, that was the casino, the beach casino. But that was, you remember where the old ferry dock, what they call the old ferry dock was, all the way at the far end. The pylons are still there now. But anyhow, when we
Is
were
that
growing
where
up,
that was?
yeah, that's where that was. I've got a picture of it somewhere that.
Wasn't there by the jetty also?
Well, that was a bathhouse, a beach
There was not a
bathhouse.
dance.
but
They didn't
that
no
was-
dance hall, just a bathhouse.
Well, no, I think it was a dance. I think they danced there too. It was that was earlier. That was before World War One. But when the sailors were stationed at Sandy Island, then they'd come over and mingle with the Cape Charles girls, the local girls, and all that kind
Right.
of stuff. And so I'm sure they probably had dances there too. But
That was before y'all's time.
yeah,
Yeah.
and all I can remember of that, when we were kids, there were piles. You could still see some pilings right down there where the jetty and the beach meet out on the sandbar there. And I'm sure that's what they were part of. And I think in Jimmy's book, there's a picture of it when it was actually going. In fact, with a couple of sailors, I think standing on the dock there. I think it's a question whether that was there or on Sandy Island, because there's Margaret Carson had some pictures that belong to Pinky Wilton. And that's the only pictures I've ever seen of Sandy Island. Is one of a guy with a gun standing guard, and you can see the old buildings that were the old fish factory, which is what it was before the Army took it over, or the Navy, I guess it was.
Yeah, here in the museum, we've got some planks that came from those buildings on Sandy Island. We had like separate Sandy Island exhibit down
Yeah,
here.
it was, yeah,
And
exhibit
the
over
the
there.
planks that are on the wall, that they came from those buildings on Sandy Island.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you too about opening the museum. What made you all think about doing that? You worked in Virginia Savage and
Well, I think they took it on as a project to have a historical society, but they didn't have a building, a meeting area. And this building became available, what, in the 1980s when they decommissioned it as a power generation station. And it belonged to Delmarva Power. And they were going to, I guess, tear it down or something. And Brother Bill was able to get them to
No, but when I,
tell them the real story.
I'll tell the truth now, really. I'm the hero in this story. No. But, you know, when I worked for Delmarva Power in Exmoor, I'd come in here occasionally. This was Delmarva power plant, but it was not in my normal area of work. But, you know, I'd just come in here just for the sake of it. You know, when it was running just out of curiosity. And Jack Hickman, we talked with him a lot of times. He was an operated the plant, one of them that did. And I came in one day, he says, you know they're going to tear this plant down. And I said, no, I didn't hear it, never heard of that, you know. So anyhow, I got thinking, I talked that the women's club had I said, you know, it'd be neat to have a museum, historical society museum and all that kind of stuff. And I talked to Virginia Savage. I said, why don't you bring it up to them that if they're interested in taking that, I'll help push, instead of them tearing it down, letting them take it over and convert it into a museum. And lo and behold, they actually agreed to that. It took about 3 years because they had it, because of the site, you know, it was a lot of oil was used here, so they had to make sure the site was clean and the water was, wells were good and all that kind of stuff. And it took about 3 years, but ultimately they donated it to us. And, you know, I'll have to say the women's club did a lot of work, and you know, there was a lot of volunteers too, of course, but to clean it up and actually remove one of the generators. There were 2 of those generators in here, and I thought to myself, you know, back then I said, you know, this probably not going to survive, because a lot of Cape Charles project things that I thought were really neat, you know, would kind of tucker out, but this thing they really got behind, and I tell you, I was tickled to death with how, you know, Virginia Savage and the Women's Club and everybody came together to.
Lynn White was very instrumental in
Lynn White.
you know, getting the building in shape.
I think he was their first president, wasn't he?
I don't know.
I think he was, but anyhow,
He was.
but everybody that participated in it really did a lot, you know,
Worked
to
hard.
make it happen, and it's survived, and I'm really, really pleased at that, because I think
it's a really good location right here too, as you come into town.
the location and the building is good and solid. I mean, it's not going to rot. I mean, you still got issues, you know, with the mortar and things like that, but still, it's a good industrial site where you can show, you know, it's a good place, like you can show ferries and mechanical stuff, and yeah, so
And they donated the trains when they
yeah,
that.
Train cars, yeah.
donated locomotives and some.
Who was it gave those to us? Was it the Railroad Society over in Little Creek?
No, the railroad did.
Dickie Foster.
Well, the Cape Charles Railroad, I guess, whatever that was. It was operated with the by the Northampton Accomack Railroad,
Transportation District or something.
whatever it was. But yeah, they donated. We asked, and they let us have a couple of things there. But I just wish that years ago, when it's converted from steam engines to diesel locomotives, that somebody would have spoken up and said, "Hey, why don't you just leave one of those steam locomotives here?" You know.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen. Just like the lighthouse, I loved the fact that Dickie Foster built a bottle of the Cherrystone Bar light, but the plantation light, which I remember very well. I think the Coast Guard blew it up, you know, when somebody could have floated that thing in and set it there at the beachfront, maybe by the jetty, and had a visitor center there or something like that, but didn't happen.
That's a shame. Just don't think of it at the time, I guess.
Yeah, well, or nobody pushed it. And then Dickie Foster, I thought it was great that he built a replica of it over at Bay Creek. that's still there, hopefully. And when they auctioned it off, I tried to talk some people in the town to buying the thing and doing, even though it wasn't the original, it was a very accurate replica.
Is that
But-
is that the plantation? Is that a replica of the plantation?
Yeah, plantation light.
Not Cherstone Bar.
Not
Light.
Cherstone Bar, no.
Yeah.
But
Plantation light.
there is an exact replica of that up at Cambridge, which you ought to visit if you've never been there. It's neat, and they floated it, and we've got pictures here in the museum. When they put it on a barge, they stored it here at the harbor over the winter, and then the next spring they hauled it up with the lens and everything up to Cambridge. Yeah, what? Oh yeah, right here. This picture of it. And this is when it was being stored in the harbor, and this is when it was being put on the barge, and ultimately it ended up in Cambridge, or near Cambridge, Chop Tank, like it was called, and it stayed there until it got destroyed up there. But Cambridge built an exact replica of it, and they've made it into a little museum and tell the whole history of it. So that's neat. But
Yeah, I've been there. It looks great.
yeah, it's a shame that couldn't have happened down here. But too late now. But we could still, like I said, the one that Dickie Foster had, I really wish we could have gotten the town to buy that, but couldn't get, and it didn't go for that much money. The main problem would have been moving it. And I even talked with the guy that moved the Hatteras light, and asked him about it. And he said, well, your best bet would be to move it over land, and you had to brought that through Bay Creek with all the clear trees out and stuff like that. And that, I thought maybe they could get a barge in there or something, load it on a barge and float it around to the other side. I mean, they floated houses from Hog Island and Cobb Island to Oyster and Willis Wharf and Quimby and places like that. So
By barge. And that house they used for Hook and Harvey's
yeah,
from Worcester all the way.
yeah, absolutely. So, but it didn't happen. So, and I don't know what somebody private that was in there, but I can't remember. It went for under $100,000. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't an outrageous amount considering what it was, and I always tried to hoped we could get the lens from it, but I've never exactly tracked it down. I think it moved with the lighthouse, but I think it left. They separated the lens from the lighthouse and put it in a light up at Smith Island, Maryland, I think, and it may have ended up at a little museum in Oxford, which I've been up there a couple of times and beat on them about it, but we're not going to get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Cape Charles has kind of had a revitalization.
It has.
Do you think it's a good thing or?
I think if I had to say one or the other, I would say good. But I mean, they're negative, just like anything like growth and stuff like that. But the way it was going when we got out of high school, if it had continued like that, I mean, it was turning into a Bayside slum.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, there were still some nice homes here, but there was a lot that were being rotten and falling down or being torn down because they're in such bad shape and not painted. And so I would take what we got now far and above what would have happened if you projected what it was like, say, before Bay Creek.
Yeah.
A lot of people maybe don't agree with that, but I think Dickie Foster did a good job
Yeah.
of preserving the history and all that kind of stuff with it.
I think he did too. It was so sad because everybody, young people had to leave to work, you know. And, you know,
It's good to see new homes going up. It's good to see businesses. I don't know how many restaurants we got now, 12 or 13, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
I can remember when we were growing up, you could go to Et's.
You had Paul's out at Sheridan.
Yeah, Paul's and Rebecca's.
Yeah.
When Bob and I first got married, that was the only one.
I was at the Rupert. I was telling him we could go get lunch at Et's. What was Et's name? First name?
I don't remember.
Bob. It wasn't Bob, but it was something. But Rupert thought it was a woman's name, but it was. Who was the Et's guy that ran that place?
Rebecca's, or
Well, I was at Rebecca's later, but he
I don't know.
I guess maybe Bob Etz, but that don't sound right. But anyhow, I said something rude. We could get lunch at Bob Etz, and he thought it was a woman, but it wasn't Bob Etz. It was some other name like Bob Etz. But
It was like a pool room before it was a restaurant, wasn't it? Were we talking about the same
Well,
place?
he had. Well, I can remember he had on the jukebox there. He had all kinds of things. He had a sign up by the ladies' room. Any men caught in the ladies' room would be thrown out immediately. Nobody turned the volume
Could
up
tell
on the
something there'd been an
jukebox.
incident.
Yeah, a lot of tough rules to follow. You know, it's a classy place. But the food was great. It really was.
When I was a little girl, I'd come in town with my grandmother, and we'd eat lunch at McCarthy Hotel, which is Hotel Cape Charles now.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a picture up there of, oh shoot, I can't think of her name now. She was Miss America. Bess Myerson had come into town one
Yeah, I
time.
remember that.
And every time we'd go, my grandmother would say something about her. She was in
Yeah, I
Cape
remember
Charles.
they had the Miss Eastern Shore contest here, I think, and she came.
Yeah.
I think is what it was for. I got my first camera that year.
Really?
And I took a picture of her. You know, they had a little parade down the street, and she stayed at the Collins house, Gene Collins, and her mom's house there, and Elwood Collins, her father's house. And I can remember I got some pictures of them there. And who was Miss Eastern Shore that year? Do you remember? It wasn't Cape Charles girl, I don't think.
I know a lot of that beauty contest stuff came about, I think, because our cousin, Ruth Ellen Mears, was Miss Virginia in 1948, 47. And because of that, I think it attracted the Palace Theater, accommodated those events, I think. And so 2 or 3 of them, these beauty contests and stuff, I think happened because of that, maybe.
Wow, that's neat.
Is there anything else, any photos y'all want to show, or
Well, I don't
anything
know. I
else?
think I showed. That was a typical one when we were kids
I
sitting
think you
behind the
showed
house
that
with her
one.
dog Skippy. Saw our ancestor there. Here's some, I guess, of. This is Lance Fortune and his wife. She was our Ocracoke connection.
You want to hold that up?
So I gotta stand up so I can see.
So, their
This
family
is,
on
this
them.
is Mom's dad, Lance Fulcher, and this is Mom's dad, Lance Fulcher, and his wife.
Elizabeth.
Oh, this is Lance, and this is Lydia Fulcher. Lydia Fulcher. And like I say, her family was from Ocracoke. And,
Her name was Hawkins, right?
her name was Lydia Hawkins. No, she was from North Carolina, but not Ocracoke. And then, of course, Lance's father came here from Ocracoke. So that's her North Carolina connection. And this is Mom and Dad probably after they were married early on, or maybe a little later on, because Dad looks like he's got a little age on him. This is Mama when she was a little kid on Randolph Avenue.
Okay, lift it up for the bottom
Okay.
row.
So
Okay.
that's Mom when she's a
Okay.
little kid living on
Pretty.
600 block Randolph Avenue.
And that one.
And that's a Mom with Junius and myself at the house where we grew up in,
Okay.
Randolph Avenue. That's a picture of one of the other of us in front of the house there on Randolph Avenue.
Well, that's a good one.
This is at my Uncle Lynn's house down at Pickett's Harbor, standing in front of his. We used to go down there and visit a lot with him and his wife Agnes, which was Mom's sister, and play around down there.
What was the last name?
Agnes Mears, Lynn Mears and Agnes Mears.
Okay.
Yeah, but she was a Fulcher. And then this was Dad in World War I in the ambulance corps.
Wow.
And this is Dad's mama here, Margaret, oh shucks. I know her last name's clear, I can't think of it. Here it is.
Yes.
What was Margaret's, her grandmother's name there?
Margaret, Mister?
Margaret Mister. She is our connection to the Picaroon Pirate, Marmaduke Mister.
Oh, okay.
And I think, I don't have any good pictures, but I'm pretty sure this is my dad's dad here, William Neville, who moved from place to place. I'm not sure where this picture was taken. This might have been when he was living toward the end of his life in Newport News.
So I guess that's it. That's all that I can see. Yeah, that's all those. I think you saw this one. Didn't? Okay. Well, this is probably when we were 2 or 3 years old, I guess, with our curly blonde hair.
Oh,
Mama.
let me tilt it because the glare is all over her face. There we go.
Okay. All right. And here's the authentication. My mama says we were precious but not so pretty. When in truth was, she was looking at the wrong end of the baby. The baby's there because we were breech birth. And that's documented also. And I think you've seen those two also.
Yeah.
Dad one, okay. And where he was so pretty. Handsomest man in Europe.
You got that from us, me and Jim.
Yeah, inherited that from us.
All right, that's it.
I think so.